Good afternoon, everybody. Happy Monday. I want to thank you all for being here, and I want to thank my colleagues for being here today. We're going to discuss a very important topic. As you all know, it's budget time, and the governor's proposed a $252 billion budget. Let me say that again, $252 billion budget, $15 billion more than what was passed last year in the budget. Next week, the legislative majorities come out with their one-house budgets. God knows how much more they're going to want to add to that $252 billion. But I don't think you can talk about the state budget without talking about the MTA and the MTA budget. They have a $20 billion budget. And a few weeks ago, we stood here with Congressman Lawler, and I learned a fact while he was speaking. That $20 billion budget is bigger than 14 other states in the nation. Amazing. $20 billion for an authority in New York State. And they always want more money. And that's why I say we can't talk about the state budget without talking about the MTA budget. And we saw that with congestion pricing. You know, they can couch congestion pricing anything they want, good for the environment, whatever. We all know the reason they wanted congestion pricing is because they wanted another revenue stream. And any time you have a budget like a $20 billion budget, there's going to be fraud, waste, and abuse. Anytime you do that. And indeed, back in 2022, they had something like $700 million that was attributed to fare evasion. And what did the MTA do to try to stop that, maybe recoup that $700 million? They did a study on the psychology of fare evaders. So clearly, a lot of their priorities are not the right priorities. I think we, as legislators, have a responsibility to make sure taxpayer funds are spent efficiently and effectively. And so that's what this press conference is about, to explain what our proposals are, specifically as it relates to the MTA. So with that, I'm very pleased to introduce our ranker on Ways and Means, Ed Ra from Nassau County. Ed?
Thank you, Leader. Good afternoon, everybody. So, as the leader said, we're here today to talk about the MTA, but this is not a press conference to say we hate congestion pricing, although we do. But it's a press conference to talk about the overarching issue that is the MTA. Whether it was when congestion pricing passed a few years ago, whether it was 2 years ago in the budget, when there was an increase in the MTA payroll tax for New York City, whether it was going back 15, 16 years ago when the MTA payroll tax first got into effect. Every few years we do this dance where, essentially with a gun to our heads, the MTA comes and says, we need more money, otherwise we're going to have to drastically cut services, drastically hike fares. And what do we hear from our constituents when those proposals come out? We hear, well, why do I read about some scandal every few months? Why do I hear about fare evasion and the MTA not seriously cracking down on that? Why do I hear about, all of the abuses that we've seen, the cost that it takes to build track and keep the system up to date? And we're here to say, it's time to really pull back the rug and see what's going on and try to have a better MTA. Make no mistake, myself and my colleagues, not just in the MTA region, but all over the state, want the MTA to be a transportation system that's efficient, that's reliable, that's safe. So that's not what this is about. We want to make sure that the downstate economy, which relies on that transportation system, is able to. But what do we think that we have to do? We think we need a full forensic audit. That's what this bill calls for. And as part of that, actually coming back to the legislature with at least half a dozen potential governance models, changes to the governance of the MTA to hopefully move us forward in a more efficient manner so that we can make sure the Transportation Authority is properly run, so we're not doing this every few years. So I just want to go back a second. The MTA generated $30.8 billion in revenue in the 5-year period between 2019 and 2023 from dedicated taxes that we send them from New York State. So that's why this isn't just a downstate issue. Our upstate colleagues who often want, parity and support for their transportation systems wonder, when the state keeps providing this support, where's it going? Why do they keep coming back to us? So before I turn it over to a couple of my colleagues, I want to mention, because there have been some audits in limited forms that have gone on in the last few years. I mentioned congestion pricing. That bill required an independent forensic audit of the MTA that was conducted by an outside firm, but that was just of the capital planning processes and asset management. It wasn't a full forensic audit like we're calling for today. The Comptroller's Office does frequently perform audits. There's a lot of good information there, but again, it's usually for specific segments of the MTA, like procurement. But I would note, just in December, there was a Comptroller audit done regarding the board-approved transformation plan that had been developed pursuant to that 2019 audit I mentioned. And the Comptroller's report stated the MTA had not demonstrated that it achieved the objectives of improved service levels for the customer, process efficiencies, and cost reductions. Now, that's a very different picture than was painted at the transportation hearing just a few weeks ago by the MTA board chair, when they said everything's great, we've improved everything, we're cost effective on every project, and that's just not what we've seen over the years. So I want to turn it over to a couple of my other colleagues who represent districts in the MTA region to talk about this issue. But again, we want a full audit and suggested governance changes so that we can move forward, so that if anything comes forward, even in the next week, we could see the majorities proposing some new dedicated tax, some increase into the MTA payroll tax. Well, that should be a non-starter while we continue to see fraud, mismanagement, and abuse within the agency. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleague and friend from Staten Island, Mike Riley.
Thank you, Assemblyman Ra. Thank you, Leader. So, Assemblyman Ra touched on some of those taxes, right? So this goes back to 2009, 2010, long before I was here. So the Metropolitan Transportation Commuter District encompasses all of New York City, Rockland, Nassau, Suffolk, Orange, Putnam, Dutchess, and Westchester counties. Some of the taxes that he mentioned, just to put this into perspective, everything that is purchased within those counties has a VIG to the MTA. Additional $25 a year for all vehicle registrations. 0.375% additional taxes on everything you buy within those counties. A 0.25% tax on all cell phone calls or received within those counties. New York State gas tax, 8 cents per gallon, except in the Metropolitan Transportation Commuter District. In that district, it's 8.75. They get an extra 0.75. The mortgage recording tax, 50 cents on every $100 that are recorded. Car rentals, the New York State tax is 6%. In that MTCD, it's 11%. A few years ago, we talked about a lockbox, right, in the legislature, to make sure that those funds that were raised for the MTA did not get redistributed in the budget. They were supplanting it. The governor was using it as a slush fund and then putting the money back. We put an end to that. Long before I was here, they voted on that and did that. But then comes along another scheme, congestion pricing. The money that they raised throughout all of those taxes that were put in place in 2009 and 2010 should be enough for the MTA to actually do their job. They're broken down into so many subsidiaries that we have people doing duplicate work. That's why this bill is so important, so that we can actually have a forensic audit and maybe streamline the duplicative services. And we're not talking about the bus service and the transit and the train service. We're talking about paperwork. We're talking about the bloated bureaucracy within the MTA. You know, I sit on the MTA Capital Budget Plan Committee and the MTA Inspector General Advisory Board. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen the mismanagement that the IG office is trying to fix, but they don't have the resources. That's why it's important that we pass this legislation and we ensure that we give some transparency and some accountability to the MTA. So once again, I want to thank Assemblyman Ra and the leader, but now I want to introduce Assemblyman Brabenec to speak on this. Thank you.
I know. Hello, everybody. I'm your favorite Assemblyman, Carl Brabenec. I'm from Orange County and Rockland County, the mighty 98th District. And thank you, Mike, for that introduction. Thank you, boss, for bringing me here. But I got to say, you know, I've been here for 10 years, and the MTA is a complete joke. An absolute joke of an agency. It is probably one of the most bloated bureaucracies in America. It's unchecked. It's not good. In 10 years, I inherited a bill 10 years ago from my predecessor for Orange County and Rockland County to secede from the MTA. And I've carried that bill every single year because my residents say all the time, we're paying all these taxes. My businesses say we're paying all these taxes. All this money is going to this agency. Very little as far as service improvements. Very little as far as improving the stations. We're like the redheaded stepchild upstate. Sorry, Josh. Josh knows how it feels. But I'm telling you, something needs to be done. I signed onto a bill, an additional bill this year, which is a bipartisan bill, which many of my colleagues are looking at, for Orange County to get out of the MTA. But this bill right here is genius. And it's a simple bill. We just need a top-down audit of this entire agency. We're spending billions of dollars every single year on this, and we're seeing no improvements. Something is going wrong. And we can find the cost savings and allocate it to other areas of the state, allocate it to improvements to service, or, you know, we have to figure out something else with the MTA because it's just absolutely not working. Another joke about the system that I've seen over 10 years, counties like my counties that I represent, Orange County, Rockland County, we have representatives on the MTA board. We get a quarter of a vote. A quarter of a vote. That's absolutely stupid and insane. So that needs to change too. We need equal representation on that board. Let's get that done. But at the very least, let's take a look at where we're wasting this money and start allocating it to the right places to make positive change for New Yorkers. So thank you very much for having me here, boss. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, there's no doubt my colleagues laid out the problem with the MTA and a potential fix with doing an audit. So with that, any questions? Oh, Vaughn. We didn't know you were here.
Just wondering, off topic? Sure. Governor Cuomo is entering the New York City mayoral race formally. Does former Governor Cuomo have any role in New York politics?
I don't think so, and I think it's unfortunate he decided to run. I do question my colleagues across the aisle. Is this the best they can do? A governor that was almost impeached in New York State. So I'm disappointed. I hope the voters of New York City recognize the problems that he caused New York State, and I hope they don't support him, and I hope he's not the next mayor. Good answer. All right, thank you. Thank you, Sam.